Hello everybody, welcome to AS Tallinna Vesi's webinar to introduce the performance of the first quarter of 2014. If you face any technical problems, please don't hesitate to let us know by writing them on the chat box on the right corner. Today's webinar is hosted by the current Chairman of the Management Board, Ian Blendley, Member of the Management Board and Chairman of the Management Board as of 1st of June 2014, Karl-Heino Brooks, and Chief Financial Officer Riina Käi. Ian Blendley, Riina Käi and Karl-Heino Brooks will introduce the company's performance in the first quarter and will answer your questions after the presentation. Pre-sent question will be answered straight after the presentation, and you will then have the opportunity to ask further questions. Microphone rights are disabled during the presentation. Microphone rights are enabled to all participants after the presentation. The questions will be answered on the principle of first come, first served. I will explain how to activate your microphone after the presentation. We will now start with the presentation, and for which I will hand over turn for Ian.
Thank you very much, Marilise. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on our Quarter 1 2014 results presentation using the webinar service. Before I start doing my presentation today, I'd just like to remind everyone that this will probably be my very last presentation. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your assistance, your help, your support over the past 5.5 years whilst I've been doing this. It's been a pleasure to work with you all. I've very much enjoyed it, and certainly very much enjoyed the successes that we've had together in the past few years. So thank you very much indeed for that. That's been very helpful for me, and I wish you all every success in the future. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome Carl Brooks, my successor, the CEO designate, and I'm quite sure Carl can count on your continuing support and assistance during his tenure as CEO of Tallinna Vesi. I could start, as my custom, with an update on Tallinna Vesi's current regulatory position and the court dispute that we have with the competition authorities. Tallinna Vesi has been in a court dispute with the competition authority since 2011. As you know, this dispute arose because the competition authority suggested that Parliament use the Anti-Monopoly Bill to amend the wording of justified profitability in the Public Water Supply and Sewerage Act. Prior to November 2010, the wording of the Public Water Supply and Sewerage Act stated to operate with justified profitability. Post-November 2010, it was amended to say to operate with justified profitability on capital invested by the water undertaking. It was very noteworthy when the law was amended that the CA did not choose to amend the wording of the law in the heating sector, which is the other industry that was covered by the Anti-Monopoly Bill, where the wording of the law remained unchanged to operate with justified profitability. As a consequence of this change, then in the opinion of the Competition Authority, the privatisation of Tallinn Water is and was always illegal. Illegal since privatisation in 2001. Tallinn Water believes this amendment to the law is clearly discriminatory, and so far we've not been able to have any meaningful discussion with the CA. And if the terms and conditions of the privatisation cannot be discussed in a meaningful manner, then AS Tallinna Vesi will continue to contest its privatisation contract in the local and international courts. There have been a number of important rulings. In May 2012, the District Court ruled that the tariff mechanism in ASTV's privatisation contract is a public law contract. As such, ASTV believes the privatisation contract deserves the full protection of the Estonian legal system. In spite of this ruling, to date the Competition Authority refuses to accept that the contract should be binding on it. Hence, we still have a continuing court case. Current tariffs will remain in place until the courts have made a final ruling on the court case, but to date, no court hearing dates have been announced. Hence, a final decision from the courts may be a number of years away. In February-March 2014, we had an interesting development as Parliament reviewed and amended the Public Water Supply and Sewerage Act. Tallinna Vesi, along with Evil, took the opportunity to make some suggestions to amend the Public Water Supply and Sewerage Act. We wrote through our lawyers to the Environmental Committee and then Evil supplemented the letter that we wrote with an additional amendment suggested to the law. The Parliamentary Environmental Committee did receive both of these pieces of information. However, due to the timing of the receipt of that information, they were not able to progress the potential change in law at that point in time. However, for the first time, we did receive some positive signals from the Parliamentary Environmental Committee, whereby they stated, and this can be confirmed in the parliamentary stenogram, I think from something on the 10th or 11th of April, that the proposition was received too late. It was an interesting proposition, but the Environmental Committee itself would be inviting both Tallinna Vesi and the Competition Authority to speak in front of them to discuss the potential changes in the law. The potential changes in the law themselves from Tallinna Vesi and Evil were to state that public law contracts signed prior to the Anti-Monopoly Bill should be honoured. As simple as that. To date, we've not received any notification from the Environmental Committee regarding a meeting. However, we very much hope this is due to the change in government and the bedding in of the new government rather than any problem with the change in law. We are awaiting and working still with our legal advisors to approach the Parliamentary Environmental Committee to discuss these potential changes still further. We believe this is certainly the most positive development we have had since the dispute started in 2010-2011. Finally, as I've often said, Tallinna Vesi and its shareholders only believe in making a reasonable rate of return and a rate of return that can be benchmarked against international comparisons. The average annual real rate of return made since privatisation is 6.2%. That compares very, very favourably with regulatory practice in other sectors in Western Europe. The rates of return made by the company are not excessive. That completes my analysis of the current legal situation and discussion over the privatisation contract. I will now hand you over to Carl, who will discuss the business highlights in more detail.
Thank you, Ian, and good morning to everybody on the webinar. I will now introduce to you the business highlights for the first quarter of 2014. Compared to the same period last year in 2013, total sales have increased by 4.8%, which predominantly relates to increased water consumption from both our domestic and commercial customers. Within the same period, operating costs have been significantly impacted by increased pollution tax charges and ongoing legal costs associated with the tariff dispute. Increased pollution tax charges stemmed from a law change in 2013 that has seen the permitted levels of zinc and copper in the final effluent leaving the treatment plant at Tallinna reduced by some 400 times compared to the previous level. Just by way of background information, zinc and copper originate from all points in the water network. So we have zinc and copper in the raw water, we have it in the stormwater network originating from roofs and outfall from buildings. It comes to us from food and even cosmetics. These new levels are incredibly strict and will also significantly impact other Estonian water companies as their permits come up for renewal over the coming months. The company's treatment plant at Tallinna is very efficient and it does remove already 70% of these heavy metals, which is consistent with other wastewater treatment plants across Europe. The company is currently working very closely with the Ministry of Environment and the Estonian Water Association, EVIL, to understand how this change in law can be implemented across the water industry in Estonia to minimise the effect on ongoing operating costs and in turn customers' bills. Were it not for the heavy metal issue that we've experienced in the first quarter, the company's operating profits would be the same as per previous years in terms of percentage. Tallinna Vesi was very pleased to have won the Best Investor Relations in the Baltics by Nasdaq OMX for the first time. I also understand this is the first time for an Estonian company to win this award. We're delighted to be recognised by a commitment to transparency, as we believe this is the only way to build trustful and meaningful relationships with not only our investors but with all stakeholders. We believe in transparency and openness bring benefits to the local economy. Also delighted to say that the water quality supplied to the people of Tallinn remains very high, with 100% compliance being achieved against the stipulated standards based on the 786 samples that were taken in Q1. I will now hand you over to Rina, who will take you through the financial results in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl and Ian, and I would like to say good morning to everyone as well. Now I would like to give you the overview of financial performance of Tallinna Vesi in the first quarter of 2014. I start with the financial highlights and then will give more detailed overview about sales and cost further on. The general performance of the company has been good. The sales in the first quarter has shown slight increase compared to the first quarter in 2013, increasing 4.8% or 614,000 euros. There has been an increase across all the sectors. The domestic, commercial, outside area and also stormwater volumes are slightly up. Our gross profit has decreased by 3.46%, being 0.26 million euros lower than in the first quarter of last year. The decrease in gross profit, which also flows to operating profit, is mainly affected by the increased pollution tax. As Carlo already mentioned, although the company continues to provide efficient treatment of wastewater, the increase in pollution tax is affected by the change in the allowed concentration of heavy metals in the effluent. During the treatment process, the company removes approximately 70% of the heavy metals from the effluent, which is a very good result. The allowed concentration of heavy metals in the effluent was decreased by the law up to 400 times. Despite the highly effective removal process, it is possible that the company is currently not technically able to meet the new legal limits. The new legal limits are causing severe problems across the water sector in Estonia, as it is not currently clear how the laws should be applied. The effect of the change in the law on the pollution tax is extra 804,000 euros. Without the change, the pollution tax had been 63,000 euros higher compared to the first quarter in 2013, amounting to 279,000 euros. That reflects the general price increase that comes from the law and difference in volumes. Decline in operating profit is related to the increase in pollution tax, as well as some increase in additional legal and consultation charges related to tariff dispute. The net profit is behind the first quarter's result in 2013 by 1.15 million euros. Financial income and expenses are mostly impacted by the change of the fair value of the swap. In 2013, the change had 561,000 euros positive impact on expenses, whilst in the first quarter in 2014, the change is negative of 22,000 euros. Apart from the non-monetary impact of the change of fair value of the swap, other financial income is down by 150,000 euros and interest income are lower than last year by 53,000 euros. Without the extra pollution tax and the impact of the swaps, the net profit for the first quarter would have been 3.1% or 0.2 million euros higher than in the comparative period in 2013. Now let's move on to the next slides and I will comment on the changes a bit closer. Let's start from the sales. As mentioned already before, the total sales revenues have increased by 4.8% or 614,000 euros. Total revenues of water and wastewater services were by 321,000 euros or 2.7% higher than in 2013, amounting to 12.04 million euros. We are still operating with the frozen tariffs since 2010 and the increase in revenues is fully driven by the consumption. There has been a slight increase in all sectors. The domestic clients' consumption have increased by 1.9% or 132,000 cubic meters to 6.99 million cubic meters. Apartment blocks give the biggest share of our revenues in domestic sector, hence 95% or 125,000 cubic meters of the increase comes from this client group. Sales to commercial customers have been relatively stable, increasing 0.8% or 17,000 cubic meters to 2.3 million cubic meters. Outside area volumes are up by 19.2% or 264,000 cubic meters. Although there has been an increase in outside area consumption compared to the first quarter in 2013, then the average is stabilizing in this sector as well. Stormwater revenues are up by 0.27 million euros due to 16% higher stormwater volumes compared to the first quarter in 2013. The increase in the sales from non-regulated business comes mostly from pipelines construction and design services, which has increased by 32,000 euros or 33% to 130,000 euros. The profit from construction and design services has increased by 31,000 euros. This now takes us to the overview of costs. The operating costs in the first quarter of 2014 have increased compared to the first quarter in 2013 by 1.05 million euros or by 16.17%. The company's underlying performance in the first quarter has been good, as I already mentioned. Most of the direct production costs have remained relatively stable. There's been a slight decrease of chemical costs due to the better raw water quality. Also, electrical costs are at a low level than in the first quarter in 2013 due to the lower electricity price and lower unit cost, which has a positive impact on our expenses of 0.60 million euros. Positive effects are reduced slightly by increased electricity volumes worth 0.06 million euros. The major impact on our variable costs, gross profit and operating profit, comes from the increased pollution tax due to the change of the allowed concentration of heavy metals that I already mentioned before. Once again, I would like to highlight that the company continues to have as efficient treatment process as possible, and there has been no change in the operational effectiveness in removing heavy metals from the effluent. The company has been prudent in recognizing the costs in full based on the concentration limits, and hence the pollution tax expense recognized in the first quarter is 804,000 euros higher than they would have been without the change. As the application of the new regulation is not very clear in all aspects, the discussions about the requirements and the application of the law are ongoing. Other costs of goods sold are mainly in line with the last year's figures. They are slightly affected by the maintenance work that was started a bit earlier than last year due to the mild weather. 21.2% or 0.24 million euros increase in the administration expenses is mostly affected by the increased legal costs related to the tariff dispute. If we now move on to the cash flows. The cash balance as of 31st of March 2014 stood at 38.2 million euros, forming 18.3% of the total assets. During 3 months of 2014, cash balance has increased by 6.4 million euros. Compared to the end of the first quarter in 2013, the cash balance has increased 5.7 million euros. The biggest contributor to the cash flows comes from main operations, which is itself affected by the change in the current assets and liabilities. The company's cash flows from investing activities have been positive for past 2 years. In the 3 months of 2014, net cash flows from investing activities resulted in a cash inflow of 0.14 million euros. Compared to last year's first quarter positive inflow of 1.02 million euros, there has been a decrease of 0.88 million euros, mainly due to the less money received for the compensation for pipes of 0.82 million euros, mostly related to the sewage extension program that was finished in 2012. The collection for compensation for pipes under this program will continue till March 2015. In the first quarter of 2014, we also have received less interest, as last year Tallinna Vesi paid back its loan to the company in full. The company has not given out any new loans. The cash flows used in financing activities has remained relatively stable, being impacted by the lower interest payments. In 20 May 2014, the annual general meeting of shareholders will be held, during which the dividend payment will be voted for. The dividend payment proposed to the AGM is 90 cents per A share, which is 3.8% increase rounded to the closest cent compared to the last year's dividends of 87 cents per share, and which is in line with the dividend policy of the company. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and all your questions are really now welcome.
Thank you, Ian, Carl, and Riina. We had one pre-sent question. I will read it and I will hand over the question answer to Riina. Looking at cash balance of the end of 2011, 2012 and 2013, a growing trend can be seen. But keeping cash on the account is obviously the most inefficient activity because additional profit is generated from a quicker cash turnover. What is the management of Tallinna Vesi planning to do with the cash in 2014 besides the payment of dividends and related income tax of the company? Behind the increase in the cash balance, can one see an uncertainty of AS Tallinna Vesi's with regard to the outcome of the ongoing court dispute, or are investments pushed into the future because they cannot see any project of sufficient profitability where to invest in?
Thank you.
Riina?
I'll take this one. Actually, Tallinna Vesi is still involved in the tariff dispute, as all the investors are very well aware of. Based on the developments so far, we do believe that the contract should be honored and we do everything to protect the best interest of our investors. Our current dividend policy is to give dividends in real terms, which means to increase them by CPI in real terms, which is in the year this year's proposal, and it gives a decent yield for investors. As the tariff dispute is still ongoing, we have taken the conservative approach, as we have also recognized the contingent liability of 34 million euros in our accounts, or the payments in our accounts. They are not recognizing the figures yet. And hence, the dividend policy is kept unchanged. The expansion of the company is also related to the current regulatory regime in Estonia and ongoing tariff dispute. So we are, in this situation, we are taking a conservative approach and we reserve our rights to carry on our current investments as they are.
Thank you, Riina. I already see one question arriving, but you can also use your microphone. So before we start reading out loud the questions in chat box, I will just briefly introduce how to enable your microphones. We have enabled them, and in order to ask questions, please activate your microphone as follows. Click on the microphone icon, choose Connect My Audio and click Allow. The microphone is active when the icon is green. To adjust the volume, please once again click on the microphone icon, adjust microphone volume, and please mute your microphone while not speaking by clicking on the microphone button. And of course, if you have any technical issues, please write in the chat window. And we have the first question from Jonas. Thank you, Jonas. Are you aware of any water companies in Estonia which are currently technically capable to meet the copper and zinc criteria? Carl will take this one.
At this moment in time, no, we're not aware of any other Estonian water companies that are compliant with the new limits. As mentioned previously, the Estonian Water Association, EVEL, are working with all water companies in Estonia to understand the application of these new limits. And as soon as we get some further information, we'll share that with you.
Thank you. Another question from Peter Piesel. How do the new pollution tax rates compare to the levels established in other countries?
Oh.
Ian will take this.
Hi Peter, Ian, I'll just answer this question. We understand that the limit itself that has been written into the Estonian legislation does come from an EU directive, but it comes from a directive on the quality of actual seawater itself. So you would be actually measuring the amount of zinc and copper within the seawater, not so much at the point of treated effluent as is coming out of the treatment plant. Just to give you a comparison of what we do know across the Baltics is, at the moment, I think Tallinna Vesi's treated effluent, our standards are somewhere between 10 to 15 micrograms that are going into the sea. However, if we're looking at Helsinki water, the information that we're having from Helsinki is that within their legislative framework, they are allowed up to anything to 50 or 60 micrograms per cubic metre. So you can see that actually it's a recommendatory standard by the EU, I think, that has been taken in an extreme measure as obligatory by the Estonian authorities. Certainly to the best of our knowledge, we have not come across any other country which has established such a firm target, or certainly any other water companies within the Baltic region who are capable of achieving such a standard, or who are in fact asked to achieve such a standard.
Just to add to what Ian said as well, back in the UK and United Utilities, which, as you're aware, is our technical operator, the limits are very low compared to the UK. And what happens in the UK is each treatment works has its own limits set based on the environment that it's operating in, because these limits are variable dependent on the population and the surrounding area. So again, to comply with these limits, very low limits, is very harsh.
Another question. Thank you, Peter. What exactly is unclear in terms of application of new pollution tax rates? Can you provide a bit more color on that? Is the fact which water is measured the basis upon clarity?
I think at the moment within the legislation there's talk of mixing zones, and this affects where you actually take the sample from in the network and the dilution. I think that's the bit that we need to work with Evil and the ministry to understand, to make sure that we're taking the limits, taking the actual samples from the best source.
It's a problem across the industry, this, Peter, for lots of the water companies at the moment. We just don't know how to measure, to actually take a proper sample that we can report. Hence, in this quarter's accounts, the reason we've taken such a prudent position is we just don't know what to do. And you'll see in the stock exchange announcement that we made yesterday, Mr. Tarkmes, the CEO of the Estonian Water Association, has also expressed the same concern. So as a consequence, as I say, of that absolute uncertainty and lack of clarity about how to sample and how to measure, we have recognised a very prudent position in this quarter.
We see another one coming in. When is the payment due? Tiina, will you take it?
The payment was due on 17th of April, at the same time when the declaration needed to be submitted. As far as there is uncertainties, and currently the company has taken the view that we are declaring it on a prudent basis. We also paid the tax on time, taking into consideration that every tax that is declared need to be paid on time, in order not to start paying tax interest on top of it. And it's also related to the fact that if you don't pay your taxes on time, you are losing out the better rate of a general coefficient that is applied to pollution tax in itself.
Peter, I also would add that we have contested this officially already. You know, we have reserved the rights with both the Ministry of Environment and the Tax Board to amend our payments at a later date. As I say, we paid to be prudent, we've accounted for to be prudent, but at this point in time, due to the absence of clarity, we are not sure how the law should be applied, and therefore we are actually going to contest the decision.
Another question from Reino Ben, thank you. Could we see some reversal in the cost then? Riina will take this.
If there will be more clarity and it will be decided that the concentration is not so low and should be applied differently, then yes. But it depends on how the developments will go with Evil, with ourselves, and with the environmental department. If it will be decided that this is applied differently, then yes.
Another question: what is your best guess when we will have clarity on the issue?
Okay. What I will say is, obviously this issue is number one of importance at the moment to the company, and a lot of management time and effort is being spent on this. We're really keen to bring this to a conclusion as quickly as possible, and hopefully before the next quarter's pollution tax payments. Yeah, and as mentioned previously, the industry as a whole is involved with this. The water permits are issued on a 5-year basis to the individual water companies of Estonia, and this increased charge will hit them as those permits come up for renewal. I understand by 2015 all those permits will be in the renewal phase.
Okay, another question. Is it so that if Tallinna Vesi would be regulated under cost plus or regulated asset-based approach, then you could add these, add this increased pollution tax cost into the tariff? In a way, would you say that which should measure the state can pressure you to go to agree to being regulated by competition authority based on their methodologies?
I'll pick that one, Peter. It's Ian. Thanks for the question. In both cases, under cost plus or regulatory asset base, it would go into the tariff. And certainly when you're looking at using the competition authority's methodology, then obviously any capital investment would go straight into the regulatory asset base, which it actually would go straight forward into the tariff itself. So either methodology, it doesn't really make any difference here. This is straight through to the tariff.
Another question, Sander Nakor, thank you. Is it too early today to say how much this year net profit is affected of this new uncertainty? Riina will take this.
In the worst case, if it's not sold, the approximation of the impact might be 2.5, 2.6 million euros extra pollution tax.
Same every quarter.
Do we have another question coming in? If there, oh, coming, Jonas. Thank you, Jonas. There have now been a couple of quarters which have seen very elevated administrative expenses due to the tariff dispute-related legal fees. Approximately 200,000 euros per quarter. I'm aware that there are only very slim chance of provision of any such forward-looking statements, but would it be possible to give some indication of the sustainability of such cost level in the coming periods? Should we count that with period of 0.8 million euros for legal fee expenses for a 12 months period, or could that be an overstatement? Riina will take this.
We couldn't really comment on that because we don't know how quickly and those developments will carry on, and when and how the solution will be achieved and get.
I think in summary, Jonas, we don't give forward-looking statements anyway, so we wouldn't do it. But even in this case, if we could, we wouldn't know because we've got no idea of how the court cases will develop over the next 12 months. Should we actually get some court dates that came through quickly, obviously the legal expense would increase. It's just impossible for us to predict.
Thank you. We see another one coming in. Thank you, Peter. Do I understand correctly that when you state average annual return rate for the investment based on privatization contract, then this calculated without terminal value? Ian will take this.
When looking at it from a regulatory perspective, Peter, you don't actually use a terminal value in it. This is just a regulatory return on the asset base itself. If I'm coming to the question that you've asked about what you're really saying is what is the rate of return made by the company on privatisation. I can't actually recall the number off the top of my head at the moment, but we have got something published on our website. I think the IRR to date would be somewhere in the region of 3 or 4%, no more. But I can certainly come back to you and the rest of the people with that outside of it, because we have answered the question previously.
Thank you for the presentation and answers.
Thank
you,
you.
Hi, Peter.
well.
I said we'll circulate a link, I think, to everybody afterwards when you can answer that last one with the terminal value in, Peter, of the lifetime. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Because that's a return on equity question.
Yeah. If you have any more questions, you can send them via email as well. They're always welcome. Thank you, everybody, for participating, and
That's just Peter.
And hopefully we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.